After you download and extract the files, you have a sound effects folder, a LUTs folder, the DRFX installer, and you have a README file. You also have these additional files that I'll go over later. First and foremost, you want to click on the README file. And the README file contains the links to the fonts that I use for the title packs. You just click on the link and it'll take you to the site to download it. If you try to use one of the titles without the font installed, you'll get this little message here in which you can go into the Inspector tab and change the font. So we're going to go to the titles, GS titles, hit the drop down, and you'll find Godsend Essentials. Per request, I included a karaoke style title. You can adjust the scale and the time scale to adjust it to the lyrics of the song. You can also keyframe the scale if you want more precise controls. You have to type in your lyrics and you can section it off utilizing the titles. You can control the effects of the glow and also the color by changing it right here. I included two of them. The second one is a scroll animation. Again, you have to mess with the scale and time scale to adjust it for your timing. This side has an animation with a texture on it. The texture can't be changed, but you can change the color underneath the texture. This title also has a texture. Whatever you change the text to, the texture will remain. It also has a logo animation. If you scroll down to the bottom here, this is just a default logo. You can cut it on and off if you want to. Then if you select browse on the file name, you can navigate to any logo that you may have or a client may have. And just a simple slide in animation. This one uses the 3D system and also has a texture on it. You can change the color of the texture / bezel using the color wheel. This one has a subtle animation with this little glow that go across the front of it. There's a VHS effects I'll show here in a second, but these here at the bottom just basically just overlays. You can use these to coincide with the VHS effects that I'll show here in a minute. Go into generators, GSFX, and go into the Essential Pack. These are actually updated versions of the Zoom presets that I released. You can only get within this pack. They're more dynamic and also retool the motion blur to where it's not as demanding as far as computer resources on your computer. You just place it over your clip and they'll create this quick zoom effect. Go into this drop down here and change it to Fusion Overlay. You'll see the X here. You can change your pivot point to decide where you want the zoom to occur. You can determine how far the zoom goes by turning up the scale. I'm gonna turn it back down. It's a little too far. And then you can also determine the speed of it by turning up the time scale. Like I said, these are dynamic, so the zoom in and zoom out will automatically occur according to the length of the clip. If you don't want to zoom out the end, just click the zoom out checkbox. From there, it'll just zoom in and remain the same. Each one of the zooms have a different animation curve that you can customize right from the Inspector tab. If you don't want to mess around with this, you can just hit this drop down, change it from custom to easing, and then use the preset animation curves that are built into Resolve. The continuous zoom just gives you a slow zoom in animation over time. And the zoom out does the opposite, of course. And close down the generators and go into effects, GSFX, hit the drop down, and we're gonna go into, once again, go into the Essentials pack. As I mentioned earlier, I have a VHS effect, so if I drop this onto my clip, this is basically an updated and also more subtle version of the VHS effect I released in my retro pack. This one's a lot more subtle than the one I originally released, and then like I said, you can go back to titles. You can use these titles to really sell the VHS effect. Each one of the VHS effects are variations of one another, and so the controls you have in the Inspector tab will vary depending on which one you're using. Strolling up here to the frames, you have these different frames you can place on your clips to really sell the effect as well. The frames can be adjusted as far as the color and also the size and the softness of the edges. These are effects I wanted to include as generators, but it was causing issues, so I just made them regular effects. This is the handheld. So if you had a still image that basically wasn't too much going on, you want to add a little camera movement, you can place this on it. You can see here, you got the little subtle shake to it on your clip. Another one I updated is this zoom rotate from my GS camera effect that I released a long while ago. Whenever you place on the clip, it'll zoom in and also rotate the axis. You can just turn up the rotation wheel, determine, or just type in the number. So I'm typing 180. So over the course of that clip, it'll rotate 180 degrees, or you can put it on adjustment clip if you want to pinpoint the location in which the zoom occurs. With the pivot point, you can change the angle, allowing you to focus the zoom and rotation effect. I included a single preset for my camera shake effect. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles from that Rumble pack, so you don't get the flashing and that stuff. You just get the controls. You can also control the different axes. So you can still crank up the strength, the rumble speed, and everything, and still create a camera shake effect, and it still tapers off towards the end of your clip. I updated the slow shutter effect. I basically just went through and tweaked the game to make it more subtle and make it where it's not as taxing, but it's still kind of rough on your computer. That'd be something you definitely want to use the render cache for. I included a secondary slow shutter in which you can mess with the RGB effects. If you have all 3 channels on, you'll have a normal color. You'll just get this little halo effect, which you can just double click the size to resynchronize it and then more or less look normal. But then if you cut off one of the channels and then increase the size down here, you can create this RGB kind of like ghosting effect. And for the clone and roto effects, you need to, of course, rotoscope your subject. I'll leave links in the description for past videos if you need help with that. In order for the clone and roto effects to work properly, you need to render your subject in place. I'm gonna right click, render in place, and type, I'm gonna leave it as DNHR 444 12-bit, and then I'm gonna select render as source resolution. Select render, and find a place to save it to, and then when I go back and disable my background clip, now I have my rotoscope subject with the alpha background. So now I'm gonna use these rotos effects to create a transition. I'm gonna grab Roto 1 and place it into my clip. Now the animation curve is basically set up for it to animate more or less towards the end. So right at the end, my subject will come in. Adjusting the scale will change the placement of your final animation. So say for instance, if I go back and set a keyframe here and then go a couple frames in and I want them to move over here, I can do that and then stop there and then hit this little down here to reset it. It's another keyframe. You can create your own animations. And by double click this and I reset it. Now with the Roto effects, I use the same motion blur that I use on the zoom in generators. So it's a lot smoother and also, like I said, a lot less taxing on your computer. So I'm going to delete that and then I'm going to go and grab a clone effect. This one I think has 5 or 6 clones. Yes, they all have a different time scale, so they delay by one another. You can adjust the animation curve and the scale for each clone, which is labeled clone 4, clone 5, clone 3, and basically you can create your own animation. Again, using the scale, which basically just change the placement of them, and then you can set a time delay utilizing the time offset. That will determine how quick the animation is. If you see this little like rainbow kind of haze thing around your subject, don't worry about that. It's only doing that because I don't have render cache on. But when you render out your final subject, you won't see that. I almost forgot to have a night vision mode as well. Utilizing these transforms here at the top, you can actually move around the scope if you want to. Select this drop down, you can change it to binoculars. And then hit drop down again, you can change it to none for just a plain night vision view. Going back up to the top, I'm going to click on video transitions and GS transitions and essential pack. I only included 5. I do plan on adding more, and there'll be a free update you'll get. I didn't have time to work on more of them. Should be able to drag and drop now. This little hole punch transition creates this inverted effect with this little film strip going across the top. And you can grab the handle of the transition and shorten it down if you want to create a quick transition effect. The effect drops the frame rate to every 2 frames. If you want to change that, you can do that here within the inspector tab. The higher the number, the less frames it'll go through. The lower the number, the more frames will play out. So you go to 1, basically, well, let's play it 1 frame at a time. By default, it's set to 2 frames, so every 2 frames are animated. I forgot I included a standalone frame drop effect. This gives you the stop motion effect. This one here is my favorite, creates this flickering effect. Now we're going to install the LUTs. Go to the little cog wheel here, go to color management, you're going to scroll down to the bottom, you're going to select open LUT folder. Once your folder's open, you can copy and paste or just drag the folder over to the LUTs folder, drop it, which I already did it, so it's going to replace it. You're going to close your file explorer, you're going to hit update LUTs, and then hit save. Going into the color page, you should see Godsend Essential LUTs. These are not LUTs that are going to color grade your footage for you. They're more or less used to set like a tone or like a mood if you want to. You got summertime LUTs, you got thermal LUTs, you got set the mood, they're real moody and gritty. You got film looks and black and white. Ideally, you probably have a couple of nodes. Then you can add something like summertime, which is summertime number 8. I move this to the side. Since this is stock footage, I already had a color grade applied to it. But you can go through and tweak things like the contrast saturation. Ideally, you'll have the LUTs towards the end of your node tree, and you'll make additional customizations and tweaks in front of it. Now the sound effects. If you haven't already, click on Sound Library and download the sound library from Blackmagic Design. Comes with a couple of sound effects in it, but not a lot. But what we're going to do is add the sound effects that come in this pack to the sound library, so they're available anytime you need them. Just click on the little 3-dot menu here and then hit add library. And so right now I'm gonna click on music, go to my sound effect folder, and then hit select. You can just mention the action, do you want to use this folder based on your library, hit yes. Once it's done, it'll say successfully scanned, then hit okay. I recommend having one folder for all your sound effects and just add sound effects to that folder. You have to go back to the 3-dot menu, add library, reselect that same folder, and basically just rescan it and then sync everything to your sound library. So now if I go over here to search, I hold shift and type the number key 8. Which is going to give me the stars. Some odd reason you type in the 3 stars, it's going to bring up all your sound effects in alphabetical order. You can double click to play them, and then whatever effect you want, you just bring it into your timeline, and you have the effect available. Lastly, you have a bonus. This 4K 24 FPS and the 1080p render are basically just render settings that I use for YouTube. The one I want to focus on is this 4x3. So if I go into the Deliver tab, go over here to the 3-dot menu, and select Import. If I navigate to these presets and then click on the 4x3 render, hit Open. Change the name slightly so you can tell the difference. So if I go over here now and click on this 4x3 render demo, you see the settings have changed. Using this resolution here, 2880 by 2160, will give you a 4K render, but in a 4x3 ratio, which will more or less look like this. There's been an uptick in music videos rendering out in the 4x3 ratio. So this is what these render settings will do. It'll more or less make your video look like this. If I hit P to preview, basically gonna kind of box it in. You'll have them black bars on the side, but when it's uploaded to YouTube, you won't have the bars. You just have the 4x3 ratio.